What would you sacrifice to save a stranger? Your money, your home, your entire future. This man traded everything he owned, his ship, his freedom, his only way off a dying space station, for a woman he'd never met. A woman who wasn't even human. But she wasn't just any slave. She was something far more dangerous. And when the most powerful empire in the galaxy came hunting for her, he had to make an impossible choice. Was saving her worth destroying everything else? The silence in space isn't peaceful. It's hungry. And on Black Spire Station, that hunger had teeth. Jace Martinez pulled his jacket tighter as he stepped off the transport shuttle. The metal beneath his boots groaned like it was dying. Which honestly, it probably was. Black Spire had been rotting in the void for decades, a forgotten outpost clinging to the edge of civilized space. The kind of place where decent people didn't ask questions and smart people didn't stick around long enough to need answers. He wasn't here by choice. The Kestrel, his ship, his home, was dying. The power relay that kept her heart beating had finally given up 3 jumps ago. Without it, she'd become just another piece of space junk drifting through the black. And Jace had exactly 72 hours before her life support systems would follow suit. The station's main corridor stretched ahead like the throat of some massive beast. Flickering lights cast twisted shadows on the walls, and the air tasted of recycled desperation. A few souls shuffled past him, their faces hidden beneath hoods and scars. Nobody made eye contact. Nobody wanted to be remembered. That was fine by Jace. He wasn't here to make friends. He checked the coordinates on his wrist display. Bay 94, his contact, a Val-3 named Rel, had promised him a military-grade power relay. No questions asked. Cash only. The kind of deal that usually meant stolen goods and a 50-50 chance of walking away with all his organs intact. But when your ship was dying, you didn't have the luxury of being picky. The bay doors hissed open, revealing a cluttered workspace that smelled of ozone and grease. Rel stood with his back turned, his forearms working on some piece of tech that sparked and hummed with alien energy. The Val-3 were known for their engineering skills, but also for their flexible relationship with the law. Martinez. Rel didn't turn around. You're late. Traffic was murder. Jace stepped into the bay, his hand instinctively moving to the pistol at his hip. You got what I need. Maybe. Rel finally faced him, his compound eyes reflecting the workshop's dim light. But first, you are going to do something for me. Jace's blood went cold. That wasn't the deal. The deal changed. Rel's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. There's an acquisition happening tonight. Deep in the station. I need human eyes on it. Human hands if things go sideways. I'm not muscle for hire, Rel. No, but you're desperate. The alien's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. And desperate humans do remarkable things. Jace wanted to walk away. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, find another contact, another station, another way. But the Kestrel's dying systems flashed behind his eyes. 71 hours now, maybe less. What kind of acquisition? Rel's smile was all teeth. The kind that doesn't officially exist. Follow me. They descended through the station's bowels, past rusted maintenance tunnels and forgotten storage bays. The deeper they went, the more the walls seemed to press in, like the station itself was trying to squeeze the life out of them. Jace's comm unit crackled with static, the signal struggling to penetrate the layers of metal and desperation. Finally, they stopped at a door marked with symbols Jace didn't recognize. The kind of symbols that made his skin crawl just looking at them. Beyond this point, Rel said, his voice dropping to a whisper, you've never been here. You've never seen me. You understand? Jace nodded, though every fiber of his being was screaming at him to run. The door opened onto a scene that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The room was larger than it had any right to be, carved out of the station's superstructure like a hidden cathedral. But instead of pews, there were cages, dozens of them. And in each cage, Jace's breath caught in his throat. People. Dozens of different species, all standing perfectly still, their eyes vacant and glassy. Some were human, some were definitely not. All of them had the same empty expression, like someone had reached into their minds and turned off the lights. But it was the figure in the center of the room that made Jace's world tilt on its axis. She stood alone in a transparent cylinder, her arms at her sides, her head slightly tilted as if listening to music only she could hear. Her skin was pale as starlight, marked with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the dim light. Her hair fell in silver waves around her shoulders and her eyes. Her eyes were the color of dying stars, and in those eyes, Jace saw something that made his heart stop. He saw Mira. No, not Mira. Mira was dead, had been dead for 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. Jace knew because he'd been counting every single one of them. But the resemblance was impossible to ignore. The way she held herself proud even in captivity. The defiant tilt of her chin that said she might be caged, but she wasn't broken. It was exactly how Mira had looked in those final moments before the slavers dragged her away. Beautiful specimen, isn't she? The voice made Jace's skin crawl. A Corvan merchant had materialized beside him, his scaled hide glistening with expensive oils. Pure Nexari bloodline. Haven't seen one in the markets for decades. Nexari, Jace kept his voice level, though his hands were shaking. Oh yes, used to rule half the Outer Rim before the Dominion came calling. Proud people, too proud some would say. The Corvan's laugh was like grinding metal. This one's been in stasis for months. Found her drifting in a damaged pod near the Terminus Nebula. No identification, no family to claim her. Perfect for tonight's auction. Auction. The word hit Jace like a physical blow. Around the room, other figures had begun to emerge from the shadows. Buyers, collectors, the kind of people who treated sentient beings like rare paintings or exotic pets. The bidding starts in 10 minutes, the Corvan continued. Though I suspect she'll go for quite a premium. The Nexari were known for their unique talents. Jace wanted to ask what that meant, but another voice cut through the crowd. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of all classifications. A massive Thalorian stepped onto a raised platform, his voice booming through hidden speakers. Welcome to tonight's private acquisition event. For those new to our establishment, the rules are simple. Payment in advance, no returns, no questions about provenance. The crowd murmured with anticipation. Jace felt sick. Our first item tonight is indeed special. Lot 47. A female Nexari, approximately 25 standard years. Physically intact, mentally compliant. Opening bid is 50,000 credits. 60, called out a voice from the back. 70, 100. The numbers climbed higher each bid, feeling like a knife in Jace's chest. He thought of Mira again, standing on that auction block on Kepler Station. How she'd looked at him through the crowd, her eyes begging him to do something, anything to save her. He'd been 15 then, broke, powerless. He'd watched his sister get sold to the highest bidder and done absolutely nothing to stop it. Not this time. 200, Jace's voice cracked like a whip through the room. Every head turned toward him. The Thalorian auctioneer's eyes narrowed. 200,000 credits. Do I hear 250, 220? I have on, came a response from the crowd. 240 was 2 SM. The price kept climbing and Jace's heart kept sinking. He had maybe 3,000 credits to his name. Enough to buy the power relay and some basic supplies. Nowhere near enough to compete with the serious collectors in this room. 400,000 each. The voice belonged to a figure in the far corner, shrouded in expensive robes. And I'll take immediate possession. Silence fell over the room. 400,000 was serious money, the kind of money that ended auctions. 400,000 credits, the auctioneer repeated. Going once. Jace's mind raced. He couldn't match that bid, couldn't even come close. But he had something else, something these collectors with their endless credits and casual cruelty couldn't understand. He had nothing left to lose. I'll trade my ship. The words escaped before he could stop them. The Kestrel, Corellian YT series freighter, fully armed hyperdrive capable clean registration. The auctioneer paused. Interesting. What's a YT series worth these days? 500,000 easy, maybe more to the right buyer. His home. It was a lie. The Kestrel was dying, held together by spare parts and stubbornness. But she was all he had. His home, his freedom, his entire life compressed into 60 meters of hull plating and broken dreams. I'll need to verify ownership and condition, the auctioneer said. No time for that. Jace pulled out his ship's registry chip, the small device that contained his entire legal claim to the Kestrel. Here's the deed. Take it or leave it. For a long moment, the room held its breath. Then the auctioneer smiled. Sold. To the desperate human with more courage than sense. Very. The crowd laughed, but Jace didn't care. He was already moving toward the platform, toward the girl in the cylinder. Her eyes found his as he approached, and for just a moment he thought he saw something flicker in their depths. Recognition. Hope. Or maybe just the reflection of his own desperate need to finally do the right thing. The cylinder hissed open and she stepped out into the dim light of the auction room. She was smaller than she'd appeared in the container, barely reaching his shoulder. But there was nothing fragile about the way she moved, nothing weak in the set of her shoulders. She looked at him with those impossible eyes and spoke for the first time in months. Who are you? Her voice was like music played on broken strings, beautiful and haunting and utterly, completely lost. My name is Jace, he said, and you don't belong here. The words hung in the air between them like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Around them, the auction continued, other lots being paraded before the hungry crowd. But all Jace could focus on was the girl standing in front of him, studying his face with an intensity that made him feel like she was reading his soul. You traded your ship for me, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah. He tried to sound casual about it, like he didn't just throw away his entire life on the impulse. Seemed like the right thing to do. Her head tilted slightly and those star-colored eyes narrowed. Why? It was a fair question, one he wasn't sure he had a good answer for. How do you explain to a stranger that she reminded you of your dead sister, that watching her stand in that cylinder brought back every nightmare you'd been trying to outrun for 3 years? Because nobody should be property, he said finally. Not you, not anyone. Something shifted in her expression. The walls she'd built around herself didn't crumble, but maybe they cracked just a little. My name is Nyla, she said quietly. Nice to meet you, Nyla. A Corvan enforcer approached them holding a data pad and looking bored. Transaction complete. The merchandise is yours. Standard disclaimer applies. No returns, no warranties, all sales final. Merchandise. The word made Jace's jaw clench, but he kept his voice steady. Understood. Will you be requiring restraints for transport? No. The response came out sharper than Jace intended. She won't be needing restraints. The enforcer shrugged and moved on to terrorize someone else. Jace turned back to Nyla, who was watching the exchange with careful attention. What happens now? She asked. Good question. He just traded his ship for a person he didn't know in a place that probably wouldn't hesitate to kill them both if they caused problems. His grand rescue plan had basically consisted of buy first, figure out the rest later. Not his best work. Now we get out to here, he said, hoping he sounded more confident than he felt. They made their way through the crowd past the other cages and containers. Jace tried not to look at the faces behind the bars, tried not to think about all the people he wasn't saving. But each step felt like a betrayal, like he was walking away from his sister all over again. Nyla moved beside him in perfect silence, her bare feet making no sound on the metal floor. She'd been given a simple gray tunic that marked her as recent merchandise, but she wore it with the dignity of royal robes. Whatever they'd done to break her spirit, they hadn't succeeded completely. They reached the exit without incident, stepping back into the grimy corridors of Blackspire Station. The contrast was jarring, from the surreal horror of the auction to the mundane desperation of everyday life on the station's lower levels. So Nyla said as they walked, you no longer have a ship. Nope. Which means you're stranded here. Yep. With me. Jace glanced at her, surprised by the note of what might have been guilt in her voice. That was my choice, was it? Or did you simply react without thinking? The question stung because it was probably true. He had reacted, seen Mira's face in a stranger's eyes and thrown away everything he owned in a desperate attempt to rewrite history. Does it matter? He asked. She considered this for a moment. I suppose not. The outcome is the same either way. They found a small cantina in the station's market district, the kind of place where conversations were conducted in whispers and nobody asked for identification. Jace ordered 2 portions of something that might have been food and found them a table in the back corner. Nyla sat across from him, her hands folded in her lap, her back straight despite everything she'd been through. There was something almost formal about the way she held herself, like she was attending a diplomatic dinner instead of hiding in a dive bar with a stranger who just bankrupted himself for her freedom. "You don't have to stay with me," Jace said quietly. "I didn't buy you to own you. You're free to go wherever you want." "Am I?" She gestured around the cantina at the station beyond. "Look around, Jace. This is not a place where Nexari walk free. Even if I could leave the station, where would I go? My people are scattered or dead. My homeworld is ash." The Dominion made sure of that. The pain in her voice was carefully controlled, but it was there. Raw and deep and bleeding at the edges. "What happened?" he asked. "We resisted." The words came out flat and cold. "The Dominion offered us a choice. Submit or be destroyed. My people chose pride over survival. It was not a wise decision. I'm sorry. Are you simply saying what you believe I wish to hear?" The directness of the question caught him off guard. Most people danced around pain, offered comfortable lies, and empty platitudes. But Nyla seemed to prefer brutal honesty. "Both, I guess," he admitted. "I am sorry it happened, but you're right, I barely know you. My sympathy is kind of worthless." For the first time since he'd met her, Nyla almost smiled. "At least you're honest. It's about all I've got left." They ate in comfortable silence, two broken people sharing a meal in the shadows of a dying station. Outside the cantina's grimy windows, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human suffering and alien tragedy alike. But inside, something was beginning to change. Something small and fragile and completely unexpected. Trust, maybe. Or just the recognition that sometimes when everything else falls apart, all you have left is the person sitting across from you at a table in the dark. "So what do we do now?" Nyla asked eventually. Jace looked at her, really looked at her. At the strength in her shoulders, the intelligence in her eyes, the way she'd managed to maintain her dignity even after months in stasis and minutes on an auction block. "We figure it out together," he said. And for the first time in 3 years, he meant it. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd traded away his ship to save her, and now here they were standing in the Kestrel's cargo bay, because the auction house needed 48 hours to process the ownership transfer. 2 days of borrowed time in the home he'd just sold. Nyla stood in the doorway, taking in the controlled chaos of Jace's life. Tools scattered across workbenches, spare parts hanging from magnetic strips, cables snaking across the floor like mechanical vines. It wasn't much to look at, but it had been his sanctuary for 8 years. "This is where you lived," she said. What a question, just an observation delivered in that precise way of hers. "Yeah, home sweet home." He gestured around the bay, suddenly self-conscious about the mess. "I know it's not much. Most of the ship's dead anyway. Life support's running on backup power, and the hyperdrive's been acting up for months." She stepped inside, her fingers trailing along the hull plating. "You maintained her yourself." "Had to. Couldn't afford dock fees for professional repairs." He watched her move through his space, noting how she automatically avoided the loose cables and sharp edges. "How'd you know? The welds, they're functional but not pretty. And there," she pointed to a patch job on the starboard bulkhead. "You reinforced the structural integrity with salvaged plating from at least 3 different ship classes. Desperate work, but clever." "Are you insulting my welding or complimenting it?" "Both." That almost smile again there and gone like starlight behind clouds. Jace led her deeper into the ship, past the engine room where the power relay should have been humming with life, up to the main deck where his personal quarters adjoined the tiny galley. Everything was cramped, utilitarian, designed for a crew of 1. "You can have the bunk," he said, nodding toward his sleeping alcove. "I'll take the floor." "That's not necessary." "Yeah, it is." He opened a storage locker and pulled out a spare blanket. "Look, I know this whole situation is weird. I'm not expecting anything from you. You're not my property. You're not my slave. You're not... I don't know what you are actually, but you're safe here." "Okay," she studied his face for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable feeling she was looking right through him again. "You really don't know what you've done, do you?" she said finally. "Elaborate." "The Nexara bond for life, Jace. When someone saves our life, we are oath-bound to them until the debt is repaid. It's not slavery, it's deeper than that, it's honor." Well, consider the debt paid. I don't want your oath. It doesn't matter what you want. The bond exists whether you acknowledge it or not. She sat on the edge of the bunk, her posture straight as always. But if it makes you feel better, I choose to be here. Oath or no oath. Why bad you? Because you didn't ask for restraints. Because you offered me your bed and took the floor. Because when that Corvin called me merchandise, you looked like you wanted to put your fist through his face. She paused. And because I have nowhere else to go. The honesty hit him like a punch to the gut. Here was someone who'd lost everything, family, homeworld, freedom, and she was thanking him for basic human decency. I'm sorry, he said, about your people, about what the Dominion did. You've apologized for that already. Yeah, well, seemed worth repeating. She was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. You remind me of someone. Your brother, my sister. The words came out soft, barely above a whisper. Kira was like you, impulsive, righteous. She saw injustice and couldn't help but act even when action meant death. What happened to her? She died trying to evacuate civilians when the Dominion ships arrived. Could have escaped with this royal family, but she went back for a group of children trapped in the lower city. Nyla's hands clenched in her lap. They found her body in the ruins 3 days later. She sounds like she was a good person. She was, and it got her killed. Nyla looked up at him, and for the first time he saw a real fear in her eyes. I won't let it get you killed too. Before he could ask what she meant, the ship's comm system crackled to life. The voice that emerged was distorted but unmistakably urgent. Attention vessel Kestrel. This is Dominion Patrol Ship Retribution. You are ordered to prepare for immediate boarding and inspection. Jace's blood went cold. The Dominion. Here. Now. How did they find us? He whispered. Nyla's face had gone pale as starlight. They weren't looking for us, she said, her voice tight with terror. They were looking for me. The comm crackled again. This is your final warning, Kestrel. Lower your shields and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. Jace looked at Nyla, at this woman he'd known for less than 6 hours who'd already changed his life in ways he couldn't begin to understand. She was sitting perfectly still, but he could see the tremor in her hands, the rapid rise and fall of her chest. She was terrified, and she was preparing to run. No, he said quietly. Jace, you don't understand. If they find me here... I said no. He moved to the pilot's chair, his hands flying over the controls. You're under my protection now, and I don't give up what's mine. The engines coughed to life power flowing through systems that hadn't run this hot in months. The Kestrel might be dying, but she had one more fight left in her, and so did he. Strap in, Jace said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his head. We're getting out of here. Where? Nyla asked, but she was already moving toward the co-pilot's seat, her terror giving way to something that looked almost like hope. I know a place, Jace said, and punched the engines to full burn. Behind them, Black Spire Station fell away into the dark, and ahead lay the vast unknown of open space. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was theirs, and sometimes that was enough. 3 days later, they were still alive. Jace counted that as a win. The Kestrel drifted in the shadow of a dead moon, her systems running silent, while Dominion patrol ships swept the nearby sectors. It was a dangerous game of hide-and-seek, but the old freighter's battered hull provided excellent camouflage among the asteroid debris. Nyla had proven to be an unexpected blessing. Where Jace saw a dying ship held together by prayer and stubbornness, she saw potential. Her fingers seemed to understand technology in ways that defied explanation, coaxing life from systems he'd written off as scrap. Try it now, she called from somewhere deep in the engine compartment. Jace flipped the switch for the port stabilizer. Instead of the usual grinding noise, it hummed to life with mechanical contentment. How the hell did you do that? Her voice echoed through the maintenance shaft. The harmonic resonator was misaligned. Basic engineering. Basic, I've been trying to fix that stabilizer for 2 years. Then you were trying too hard. She emerged from the shaft a few minutes later, her gray tunic now decorated with grease stains and her silver hair tied back with a piece of spare wire. Somehow she made even that look elegant. The hyperdrive should be functional now, she said, wiping her hands on a rag. Not perfect, but it won't tear us apart if we need to jump. You fixed the hyperdrive. Jace stared at her. In 3 days, I had motivation. They'd been having conversations like this all week. Short practical exchanges about ship repairs and supply rations and the best places to hide from Dominion patrols. But underneath the mundane topics, something else was growing. Something that made Jake's chest tight whenever he caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. That evening, they shared another meal in the cramped galley. Ration packs that tasted like cardboard, but somehow the company made them bearable. Nyla ate with the same precise dignity she brought to everything else, as if she were dining in a palace instead of hiding in the void. "Tell me about your sister," she said suddenly. The request caught him off guard. He'd mentioned Mira only once that first night on the station. But Nyla had a way of remembering things, filing them away for later consideration. Not much to tell. She was everything good about me, but better, smarter, kinder, braver. I was supposed to protect her. He poked at his rations with a plastic fork. "I failed." "How old were you, Trevi?" 15. "And she was 12. Nyla set down her fork. "You were children. Old enough to know right from wrong. Old enough to fight. Old enough to die." Her voice carried the weight of experience. "Would your death have saved her money? Maybe. Probably not, but at least I would have tried. Instead, you survived. And 3 years later, you tried again." Jace looked up at her. "That's not the same thing. When you saw someone in danger and acted without thinking of the cost, just like she would have done." Nyla leaned forward slightly. "You carry her with you, Jace, in everything you do. That's not failure, that's love." The words hit him harder than he expected. For 3 years, he'd carried Mira's death like a stone in his chest, a constant reminder of his inadequacy. But when Nyla said it, it sounded less like guilt and more like honor. "She would have liked you," he said quietly. "How do you know?" "Because you're not afraid to tell me when I'm being an idiot." That earned him one of her rare, genuine smiles. Someone should. Later that night, Jace found her in the cargo bay working on a piece of salvaged tech he didn't recognize. Her movements were precise and economical, each action serving a purpose. Even in the dim emergency lighting, she seemed to glow. "What are you building then?" he asked. "A quantum communicator. If we can get it working, we might be able to contact other Nexari survivors." "I thought your people were scattered." "Scattered, not extinct. There are others out there hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy. This could help us find each other." Jace watched her work, noting the careful way she handled each component. "You never talk about going home. Because there is no home to go back to. Nexar is ash and radiation. The survivors are all we have left." "That must be lonely." Her hand stilled on the device. "It is. But loneliness is better than death. And is it?" She looked up at him then, and he saw something vulnerable in her expression. Something that reminded him she was barely older than he was, despite her preternatural calm. "Ask me again in a few years," she said softly. The next morning, Jace woke to find her in the galley, preparing what might generously be called breakfast. She'd managed to make the ration packs almost palatable, seasoning them with herbs from a hydroponic kit he didn't even know he had. "Where did these come from?" he asked, tasting something that was definitely not standard military rations. "Storage compartment 7. You have quite a collection of salvaged supplies." "I've been living off ration packs for 2 years. Or are you telling me I had real food this whole time?" "You had ingredients. There's a difference." She served him a portion that actually smelled appetizing, then sat across from him with her own plate. The morning routine had become comfortable, familiar. Like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. "Jace," she said suddenly, her voice serious. "There's something you should know about the Dominion, about why they're hunting me." "Okay." "I'm not just a refugee, I'm..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I was someone important before the fall." "How important?" "Princess important." Yeah, Jace nearly choked on his food. "Your royalty was royalty. Now I'm just a woman with a very large bounty on her head." "How large?" "Large enough that half the bounty hunters in the Outer Rim are probably looking for me right now." Jace set down his fork, his appetite suddenly gone. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I knew you'd react exactly like this, like I'm some kind of liability." "You are a liability. We both are now. Yes, she said simply, but we're liabilities together. That has to count for something. Despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the very real possibility that they were both going to die horribly in the next few days, Jace found himself smiling. Yeah, he said, it does. And in the growing warmth of the ship's recycled air, surrounded by the quiet hum of machinery that Nyla had brought back to life, he realized something that should have terrified him. He was falling for her. Hard. Which, given their circumstances, was either the worst possible timing in the universe or exactly what they both needed to keep going. He was hoping for the latter. The quantum communicator came to life on their 7th day in hiding, filling the cargo bay with a soft blue glow that reminded Jace uncomfortably of the auction cylinder. But when Nyla's face lit up with the first genuine joy he'd seen from her, he decided blue light wasn't so bad after all. It's working, she breathed, her fingers dancing over the improvised controls. I'm picking up signals. Faint, but they're there. Nexari signals. Some of them. Her expression darkened. And others? Dominion frequencies. Bounty hunter chatter. They're coordinating search patterns. Jace moved closer, peering over her shoulder at the scrolling data. How many ships? At least 12 that I can detect, probably more. She isolated one of the signals, amplifying it until voices emerged from the static. Target was last seen in the Kepler sector. Princess Nyla of House Vextar. Capture alive, eliminate any accomplices. Princess Nyla of House Vextar. The name hung in the air between them like a loaded weapon. Vextar, Jace repeated. That sounds important. It was. My family ruled the Northern Territories. 3-star systems, 40 billion people. Her voice went flat, emotionless. We were the last holdouts against Dominion expansion. That made us problematic. So they killed your family? Not exactly. Nyla's hands stilled on the controls. They gave us a choice, surrender and be absorbed into the Dominion as a client state or be destroyed. My father chose destruction. My brother supported him. I disagreed. You wanted to surrender. I wanted to save our people. The words came out sharp, defensive. 40 billion souls, Jace. Entire worlds full of artists and engineers and children who had nothing to do with politics. My father was willing to sacrifice them all for pride. What did you do? I tried to negotiate, sent secret communications to Dominion Command offering to open surrender talks. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was being smart, pragmatic. I thought I could save everyone. But the Dominion doesn't negotiate with divided houses. They played my family against each other, used my communications as proof of treachery. My father branded me a traitor. My brother wanted me executed. Her voice cracked slightly. Kira was the only one who stood by me. Jace felt pieces clicking into place. Your sister, the one who died in the evacuation. She helped me escape when the purges began. Could have gone to the royal bunkers, could have lived. Instead, she chose to help evacuate civilians while I ran like a coward. You weren't a coward. You were trying to save lives, though. I was trying to save my own skin. Nyla turned away from the communicator, her shoulders rigid. The Dominion ships arrived 3 days later. They bombarded the capital from orbit, then landed ground forces to finish what they'd started. 40 billion people, Jace. All dead because I thought I was cleverer than my father. The weight of that guilt was staggering. Jace had spent 3 years carrying the death of one person he couldn't save. He couldn't imagine carrying the weight of entire worlds. That's not on you, he said quietly. Isn't it? If I hadn't tried to negotiate, maybe my family would have stayed united. Maybe we could have fought them off. Or maybe you all would have died sooner. You don't know. No, I don't, and that's what makes it worse. She faced him again, and he saw tears tracking down her cheeks. I'll never know if I was right or wrong. I'll only know that I'm alive, and they're not. Jace moved closer, close enough to touch her if he dared. Hey, look at me. She did those impossible eyes reflecting the blue light of the communicator. You survived, he said. That matters. And maybe the reason you survived was so you could help other people survive too. Like who? Like the Nexari signals you're picking up, like whoever else is running from the Dominion. He gestured around the cargo bay. Like me. That earned him a watery smile. You didn't need saving. You were doing fine on your own. Was I living alone on a dying ship, haunted by my failures, slowly drinking myself to death on cheap liquor? He shook his head. I was surviving, Nyla. That's not the same as living. Before she could respond, the communicator crackled with a new signal. This one was cleaner, stronger, and definitely not Dominion. This is Captain Tal Varanus of the freighter Distant Shore. If there are any Nexari listening, we have a safe harbor. Repeat, safe harbor available for refugees. Nyla's breath caught. Tal, he was one of my father's naval commanders. Friend or enemy? Friend, I hope. She activated the transmitter, her fingers hesitating over the controls. If I respond, they'll be able to track our signal. So will the Dominion. But yes, it was another choice, another gamble with lives hanging in the balance. But this time Jace could see the calculation in her eyes. The weight of responsibility she'd been carrying alone for 3 years. Do it, he said. She looked at him in surprise. Just like that. Just like that. We can't run forever, and you shouldn't have to. He moved to the pilot station, beginning pre-flight preparations. Besides, I'm curious to meet this Tal guy. Jace? Yeah. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for giving me something to believe in. She keyed the transmitter, her voice steady despite the tears. Captain Varanus, this is Princess Nyla of House Vextar. I'm alive and I'm coming home. The response was immediate and filled with something that sounded like joy. Princess, by the old gods, we thought you were dead. Transmitting coordinates now. We'll have an escort waiting. As the navigation data flowed into the Kestrel's computers, Jace felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Real dangerous, absolutely terrifying hope. So, he said, settling into the pilot's chair, ready to stop running. Nyla strapped herself into the co-pilot's seat, her posture straight and regal, despite her stained tunic and improvised hair tie. Ready, she said, and for the first time since they'd met, she looked like the princess she'd been born to be. The Kestrel's engines roared to life, carrying them toward whatever future waited in the dark. Behind them, the dead moon fell away into memory. Ahead lay the unknown, but they were facing it together, and that made all the difference. The coordinates led them to a hollowed-out asteroid in the Veil Nebula, invisible to most sensors and protected by the nebula's natural interference. As they approached, Jace could make out the subtle modifications that turned rock into refuge. Docking bays carved into the stone communication arrays, disguised as mineral formations, and the faint glow of atmospheric shields. Impressive, he murmured, guiding the Kestrel toward one of the docking ports. Tal always was resourceful. Nyla's voice carried a mixture of fondness and apprehension. He commanded the Third Fleet during the war. If anyone could build a safe haven, it would be him. The docking process was smooth-handled by automated systems that recognized the Kestrel's transponder codes. As they settled into the berth, Jace could see other ships through the bay's transparent barriers. Mostly older vessels patched and modified for long-range travel. Refugee ships. They were met at the airlock by a man who looked like he'd been carved from stone and polished by decades of military service. Captain Tal Varanus was tall even by Nexari standards, his silver hair cropped short, and his bearing absolutely rigid. But when he saw Nyla, his stern expression cracked like ice in spring. Little Star, he said, using what must have been a childhood nickname. You're alive. Hello, Uncle Tal. Nyla stepped forward, and for a moment she looked like the lost child she'd probably been when her world ended. I've missed you. The reunion was brief but intense, two survivors finding solace in shared grief. Jace hung back, feeling like an intruder on something sacred. But when Tal's attention turned to him, those steel-gray eyes were measuring and cold. And you are Jace Martinez. I'm traveling with the princess. Traveling? Tal made the words sound like a euphemism for something unsavory. How did you come to be in the company of the last heir of House Vextar? I bought her freedom at a slave auction. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Tal's expression darkened, and for a moment Jace thought the man might actually attack him. But Nyla stepped between them, her voice cutting through the tension. He saved my life, Uncle. Without question, without hesitation, and at great personal cost. Did he simply purchase valuable property? Enough. Nyla's tone carried royal authority despite her stained tunic and improvised hair tie. Jace gave up everything he owned to free me. He's protected me, sheltered me, and asked for nothing in return. He is under my protection. Tal studied them both for a long moment, then nodded curtly. Very well, but we have more pressing concerns than your traveling companion. He led them through corridors carved from living rock, past chambers that served as workshops, living quarters, and what looked like a command center. The asteroid was larger than it appeared from outside, honeycombed with passages and rooms that housed what must have been hundreds of refugees. How many? Nyla asked, watching children play in a chamber that had been converted into a common area. 3,000, give or take, mostly civilians who escaped the initial bombardment. Some military personnel, a few nobles who weren't deemed worth hunting down. Tal's voice was carefully neutral. We've been building this place for 2 years. It's not much, but it's home. They reached the command center where holographic displays showed the surrounding space in real time. Jace could see patrol routes, sensor sweeps, and what looked like a very sophisticated early warning network. Impressive security, he said. Necessary security. Tal activated one of the displays showing Dominion fleet movements throughout the sector. They've been increasing patrols recently, looking for something specific. Nyla went very still, looking for me. Yes, the bounty increased again last week. 5 million credits alive only. They really want you back, little star. I know why. Nyla moved to another display, one showing intercepted communications. I'm not just a refugee anymore, Uncle. I'm a symbol. As long as I'm alive and free, the resistance has hope. And as long as you're alive and free, you're a target. Tal's expression was grim. The Dominion has been systematically hunting down every surviving member of the royal houses. You're the last one, Nyla. The very last. The weight of that statement settled over them like a shroud. The last princess of a dead empire carrying the hopes and dreams of an entire species on her shoulders. There's more, Tal continued. We intercepted communications suggesting the Dominion is planning something big. A final sweep to eliminate the remaining resistance cells. They're calling it Operation Starfall. When? Jace asked. Soon. Days, maybe weeks. They're already moving additional ships into position. Tal highlighted several fleet formations on the tactical display. If they find this place, 3,000 people, Nyla whispered. 3,000 lives. Which is why you can't stay here. Tal's voice was firm but gentle. Your presence puts everyone at risk. I'm sorry, little star, but... Alarms suddenly screamed through the command center. Red lights bathed the room as technicians scrambled to their stations. One of them, a young woman with the pale skin of a deep space dweller, looked up from her console with terror in her eyes. Captain Dominion battle group just dropped out of hyperspace. 3 heavy cruisers and an escort squadron. They're moving to surround the nebula. Tal's face went white. How? They must have tracked our communications. Nyla said, her voice hollow with guilt. When I contacted you, no. Jace was studying the tactical display, watching the red dots of enemy ships spread out in a classic encirclement pattern. This is too coordinated, too precise. They didn't follow our signal. They already knew where you were. Impossible. This location is compromised. Jace turned to Tal, his expression grim. You have a spy. Before Tal could respond, another technician called out from across the room. Sir, incoming transmission. Dominion frequency. Put it through. The voice that filled the command center was cultured, aristocratic, and utterly without mercy. Greetings, rebels. I am Admiral Cross of the Dominion 3rd Fleet. We know Princess Nyla is among you. Surrender her immediately, and the rest of you will be allowed to live. Refuse, and we will turn this asteroid into dust. You have 10 minutes to decide. The transmission cut off, leaving them in stunned silence. 10 minutes to choose between hope and survival. 10 minutes to decide whether the last princess of the Nexary was worth 3,000 lives. Nyla closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, Jace saw the weight of absolute despair. I have to go, she said quietly. I have to surrender. Like hell you do. Jace grabbed her arm, spinning her to face him. There's always another option. What option? Hide behind 3,000 innocent people. Let them die for my pride. Fight back. With what? We have maybe a dozen armed ships against a battle group. We have something better. Jace looked around the command center at the faces of people who'd lost everything but hadn't given up. We have people worth fighting for. Tal was studying the tactical display with the intensity of a man solving a puzzle. The nebula's interference works both ways. Their sensors will be degraded, their targeting systems compromised. You're thinking about running, Nyla said. I'm thinking about winning. Tal's smile was sharp as a blade. One more time, little star, for the old empire. Outside the asteroid, the Dominion ships closed in like wolves scenting blood. But inside the command center, hope kindled in the darkness. Sometimes the only way out was through. And sometimes when everything was on the line, ordinary people did extraordinary things. 8 minutes, the technician called out. Tal looked at Nyla, then at Jace. Are you ready to make history? Jace thought about the Kestrel, about the girl who'd fixed his broken ship with her bare hands, about the choice between safety and doing what was right. Let's do it, he said. And in the red-lit command center of a hollowed-out asteroid, the last battle for the next series began. 7 minutes, the technician called out, her voice tight with controlled panic. Tal was already moving his fingers, flying over to the command console as he brought the asteroid's hidden defenses online. All civilian ships to evacuation stations. Combat vessels to launch positions. This is not a drill. The command center erupted into controlled chaos. Officers rushed between stations. Coordinates flowed across displays, and the distant rumble of engines echoed through the rock as ships prepared for launch. But in the center of it all, Nyla stood perfectly still, her face a mask of terrible calm. There's another way, she said quietly. Jace was helping coordinate the evacuation routes, but something in her tone made him stop. What are you thinking? The Dominion wants me alive. If I surrender myself, they'll call off the attack. No, Theo. The word came out sharper than he intended. We've been through this. You're not sacrificing yourself. It's not sacrifice, it's strategy. Nyla moved to the communications console, her fingers hovering over the controls. I surrender, they withdraw, and then you break me out later. That's not a plan, that's suicide with extra steps. 6 minutes, came the countdown. Tal looked up from his tactical display. The princess has a point. If she surrenders, it buys us time to complete the evacuation. You too, Jace stared at the older man in disbelief. You're supposed to protect her and not throw her to the wolves. I am protecting her. And everyone else. Tal's voice carried the weight of command, but Jace could see the pain behind his eyes. Sometimes the needs of the many. Screw the many. Jace slammed his hand on the console. Sometimes the many are wrong. Sometimes the right choice is saving the one person who actually matters. Nyla turned to face him, and he saw something in her expression that made his heart stop. Resolution. She'd already made her decision. Jace, listen to me. No. He moved toward her, but she stepped back, maintaining the distance between them. We do this together. Remember, that was the deal. The deal was that I wouldn't let my righteousness get you killed. Like it got Kira killed. Her voice was steady, but tears were tracking down her cheeks. I won't lose someone else I care about. Someone else I care about. The words hit him like a physical blow, because they meant she cared and they meant goodbye. You don't get to make that choice for me, he said desperately. Yes, I do, because I'm the one they want. 5 minutes. Nyla activated the communications array before anyone could stop her. Admiral Cross, this is Princess Nyla of House Vextar. I'm prepared to surrender myself to Dominion custody in exchange for the safety of the civilians in this facility. The response was immediate and smugly satisfied. How reasonable of you, Princess. You have 3 minutes to present yourself at Docking Bay 7. Come alone and unarmed. Understood. The transmission cut off, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Then Tal was moving, issuing orders with military precision. All ships continue evacuation protocols. The moment the princess is clear, we jump. Emergency coordinates, Gamma 7. Tal, Jace started. She's buying us time, son. Don't waste it. But Jace wasn't listening. He was watching Nyla walk toward the exit, her shoulders straight and her steps sure. She moved like a woman going to her execution, but she moved with dignity. He caught up with her in the corridor outside the command center. "This is insane," he said, matching her pace. "You know they're going to kill you, right, eventually? Eventually isn't today. And what about tomorrow? What about next week? What about the 3,000 people who get to see next week because of what I do today?" She stopped walking and turned to face him. "This isn't about me anymore, Jace. It never was. It is to me." The words hung between them like a confession, because that's what they were, a confession of feelings he'd been trying to ignore, spoken too late to matter. Nyla's expression softened, and for a moment she looked like the broken girl he'd found in that auction cylinder, instead of the princess she'd become. "I know," she said softly, "and that's why you have to let me go." "I can't." "You can, because you're strong enough to do the right thing even when it hurts." She reached up and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. "You taught me that." Before he could respond, she kissed him, soft and desperate and full of everything they'd never have the chance to say. When she pulled away, he could taste tears. His or hers, he couldn't tell. "Take care of them," she whispered. "Take care of yourself." Then she was walking away again, and this time he let her go. Because she was right, damn her. Because sometimes love meant letting someone make their own choices, even when those choices broke your heart. He watched her disappear around a corner and felt something inside him tear loose and die. 2 minutes echoed through the corridors. Jace made his way back to the Kestrel in a daze. The docking bay was chaos. Ships launching, families saying goodbye, the desperate urgency of people running for their lives. But all he could see was an empty corridor, and all he could hear was the sound of footsteps walking away. He was halfway through pre-flight when Tal appeared at his airlock. "She's gone," the older man said simply. Jace's hand stilled on the controls. "Already. Took a shuttle to the rendezvous point. Dominion ships are withdrawing to a safe distance." Tal's voice was carefully neutral. "The evacuation is complete. We can leave." "Good. Is it, you look like someone died?" "Someone did." Jace resumed his pre-flight checks, focusing on the familiar routine to keep his hands from shaking. "The person I was before I met her." Tal was quiet for a moment. "For what it's worth, she cares about you. More than she's cared about anyone since her sister died. Not enough to stay. No, enough to leave." The Kestrel lifted off with the evacuation fleet, dozens of ships, scattering into hyperspace like leaves in a wind. Jace set course for the emergency coordinates, but his heart wasn't pointing in the flying. His heart was somewhere else, entirely in the hands of a woman who'd chosen duty over love. As they jumped to hyperspace, he caught one last glimpse of the nebula where they'd found refuge. Somewhere in that glowing cloud, Nyla was aboard a Dominion ship, probably in chains, definitely in danger. And there was nothing he could do about it. The stars stretched into lines of light, carrying him away from the woman who'd taught him how to live again. In the co-pilot seat, where she'd sat for 7 days, her absence felt like a physical wound. But she was alive. That had to be enough, even if it felt like dying. 1 hour to destination, the navigation computer announced in its maddeningly cheerful voice. 1 hour to whatever came next. 1 hour to figure out how to keep going without her. 1 hour to learn how to be alone again. He'd done it before. He could do it again. He had to. 3 weeks. That's how long Jace lasted before he stopped pretending he was going to move on with his life. The refugee camp on Sanctuary Moon was exactly what it sounded like. A collection of prefab shelters and converted cargo containers where the survivors of a dozen dead worlds tried to rebuild their lives. It was safe, it was functional, and it was slowly driving him insane. He'd thrown himself into the work, helping establish communication networks and defensive systems. Anything to keep his mind occupied. But every night lying in his narrow bunk, he thought about Nyla, wondered if she was still alive, wondered if she was thinking about him, wondered if he'd ever see those impossible eyes again. The answer came in the form of an encrypted transmission that arrived on a Tuesday morning, hidden in the routine supply ship communications. Tal found him in the workshop, elbow deep in a power coupling that probably didn't need fixing. "You need to see this," the older man said, his expression unreadable. They made their way to the command bunker, where a small crowd had gathered around the communications array. The message was playing on repeat audio, only the voice distorted by encryption and distance. But Jace would have recognized it anywhere. This is Princess Nyla of House Vexstar Broadcasting to all resistance cells and refugee communities. I am currently being held aboard the Dominion detention ship Oblivion, en route to the core worlds for public execution. But before they kill me, I have information that could save thousands of lives. The recording crackled with static, but her voice remained steady, strong. The Dominion is preparing Operation Starfall for implementation in 6 days. Simultaneous strikes against every known resistance stronghold, refugee camp, and safe house in the Outer Rim. They have complete tactical intelligence on our locations, our defenses, our escape routes. This is not a raid, this is extermination. Murmurs of fear rippled through the gathered crowd. 6 days wasn't enough time to evacuate everyone. Wasn't enough time to warn all the scattered communities. However, Nyla's voice continued, all of this intelligence is stored in a single location, the Meridian Data Core on Nexus Station. If that facility is destroyed, the Dominion will be blind. Operation Starfall will fail. Tal was already pulling up tactical data on Nexus Station. Impossible. That place is a fortress. Orbital shields, defensive platforms, a full garrison. It would take a fleet to crack it. The data core is heavily defended. Nyla's voice agreed as if she had heard his objection. But it has one weakness. Every 72 hours, the core is backed up to off-site storage. During that backup window, the primary shields are lowered for exactly 18 minutes. That's your window. She's talking about a suicide mission, someone whispered. Maybe. But the backup cycle begins in 4 days, 19 hours, 37 minutes. If you're going to move, you have to move now. The transmission ended, leaving them in stunned silence. Around the bunker, people were looking at each other with expressions of fear and desperate hope. It's a trap, said Commander Voss, a scarred veteran who'd lost his family in the bombardment of Kepler Prime. Has to be. The Dominion is using her to lure us into an ambush. Or, Jace said quietly, she's risking her life to save ours again. Either way, it's academic. Tal gestured at the tactical display. We don't have the resources for an assault on Nexus Station. A few dozen fighters against a military installation, it's not feasible. What if we don't assault it? Jace was studying the station schematics, his mind racing. What if we sneak in, through what their shields extend for, not through, under? Jace highlighted a section of the display. Look at the maintenance tunnels beneath the data core. They connect to the waste processing systems which dump directly into space. If we could get a small team inside during the backup window. The tunnels are shielded too, Voss pointed out. Only from sensors, not from people. Jace turned to face the room. I'm not talking about a fleet action. I'm talking about a stealth insertion. 3 people, maybe 4. Get implant charges, get out. And who exactly would be stupid enough to volunteer for this suicide mission? Voss asked. Jace raised his hand. Me. The room erupted in arguments and objections, but Tal held up a hand for silence. Why? Because she saved all of us. Because she's still trying to save all of us. And because, Jace's voice caught slightly, because I'm not losing her again. She's already lost son. Even if this works, even if we destroy the data core, she's still on that ship. Still heading for execution. Then I guess we'll have to rescue her too. Now I know you're insane. Maybe, but I've got a plan for that too. Jace activated another section of the display showing shipping routes and patrol schedules. The Oblivion is a detention ship, not a warship. Minimal escort, predictable route. If we time it right, if we hit the data core first to create a distraction, you're talking about 2 impossible missions instead of 1. I'm talking about bringing her home. Tal studied the displays for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Around the bunker, the arguments had died down as people waited for his decision. The data core mission is viable, he said finally. Dangerous but viable. The rescue, he shook his head. That's pure madness. The best kind, Jace said with a grin that felt foreign on his face. I'll need volunteers, people who understand they probably won't be coming back. You've got me. That's not enough. We'll need technical expertise, combat experience. You'll have me too. The voice came from the back of the room and heads turned to see a young woman stepping forward. Kira Chen, one of the engineering specialists who'd escaped the bombardment of New Coronis. I know those systems. I helped design them. And me, Commander Voss's scarred face was grim but determined. If we're doing this, we do it right. One by one, others stepped forward. Engineers, soldiers, pilots. People who'd lost everything and had nothing left but each other and the desperate hope that maybe this time they could save someone who mattered. Within an hour, they had a team. Within 2 hours, they had a plan. It was insane, it was dangerous, and it probably wouldn't work. It was perfect. 4 days, Tal said as they finished the briefing. 4 days to prepare for the most important mission in the history of the Resistance. Jace looked around the room at the faces of people who'd chosen to risk everything for a princess most of them had never met. People who'd chosen hope over fear, action over despair. She's worth it, he said quietly. I hope so, Tal replied, because we're betting everything on that assumption. Outside the bunker, the stars of Sanctuary Moon's night sky wheeled in their ancient patterns. Somewhere among those points of light, Nyla was counting down the hours to her execution. But not if Jace had anything to say about it. 4 days to save the Resistance. 4 days to save the woman he loved. 4 days to prove that sometimes against all odds and common sense, love was stronger than fear. The countdown had begun. The Meridian data core died at 347 hours Galactic Standard Time in a ball of fire that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Jace watched the explosion from the bridge of a stolen Dominion courier ship, his hands steady on the controls despite the chaos erupting around them. Behind him, Kira Chen worked frantically at the communications array, intercepting and jamming every signal she could find. Distraction successful, she called out. Every Dominion ship in the sector is heading for Nexus Station, including our target. Affirmative. The Oblivion just altered course. They're moving to investigate. Perfect. Jace had counted on Dominion predictability on their need to respond to threats with overwhelming force. The destruction of their precious data core would draw them like moths to a flame, leaving their prisoner transport vulnerable. How long until intercept? Asked Voss from the gunner station. 18 minutes. Jace adjusted their trajectory, bringing them alongside the shipping lane where the Oblivion would emerge from hyperspace. Remember, we need her alive. No heroic sacrifices. Speak for yourself, Voss muttered, but his tone was fond. The next few minutes passed in tense silence. Then space shimmered and the Oblivion dropped out of hyperspace exactly where Jace had predicted. The detention ship was sleek and dangerous, designed to transport high-value prisoners without the need for a heavy escort, which made it perfect for their purposes. Signal them, Jace ordered. Kira activated the transmitter, broadcasting on Dominion emergency frequencies. Dominion vessel Oblivion, this is courier ship Hermes. We have priority intelligence regarding the terrorist attack on Nexus Station. Request immediate docking for briefing. The response came quickly. Hermes, you are cleared for docking bay 2. Prepare for full security screening. Acknowledged. As they approached the larger ship, Jace could feel his heart hammering against his ribs. This was the most dangerous part, getting close enough to board without arousing suspicion. One wrong word, one suspicious movement, and Nyla would be lost forever. The docking procedure went smoothly, handled by automated systems that accepted their forged credentials without question. As the airlock sealed behind them, Jace checked his weapon one last time. Everyone ready? Nods all around. They moved through the airlock like a unit, their stolen Dominion uniforms and falsified orders getting them past the first security checkpoint without incident. But Jace knew their luck wouldn't hold forever. The detention level was deep in the ship's belly, past layers of security and surveillance that would have challenged a professional infiltration team. But they had something better than training. They had desperation and a cause worth dying for. They found her in detention cell 7, sitting on a narrow bunk with her back straight and her hands folded in her lap. Even in prisoner's grays, even with bruises on her face and her silver hair tangled, she looked like royalty. When the cell door opened and she saw Jace standing there, her composure finally cracked. You're supposed to be smart, she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. This is the opposite of smart. Yeah, well, Jace holstered his weapon and stepped into the cell. You're supposed to be dead. Guess we're both full of surprises. She was in his arms before he could say another word, holding him like she'd never let go. He could feel her trembling, could taste salt when she kissed him with desperate relief. I thought I'd never see you again, she whispered against his lips. Not getting rid of me that easy. "Sir," Voss called from the corridor. "We need to move. Security sweep in 5 minutes." Getting out was harder than getting in. The Oblivion's crew had discovered the deception, and alarms were screaming through the corridors as they fought their way back to the docking bay. But they moved like a team, covering each other's backs, trusting in training and luck, and the absolute refusal to leave anyone behind. They made it to their ship with 30 seconds to spare undocking, just as Dominion security forces breached the bay. The courier ship's engines screamed as Jace pushed them beyond safety limits, racing for the hyperspace jump point before the Oblivion's weapons could lock on. The stars elongated into lines of light, and they were free. "Status report," Jace called out as they dropped back into normal space. "All systems green," Kira reported, "and the Meridian destruction is confirmed. Every Dominion database in the sector just went dark. Operation Starfall. Postponed indefinitely. Without their intelligence network, they're flying blind." Jace felt something release in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for weeks. They'd done it, saved the Resistance, rescued the Princess, struck a blow against an empire that had seemed unstoppable. But more than that, they'd proven something important. That love wasn't weakness. That sometimes the right choice was the impossible choice. That humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its weapons or its technology, but in its absolute refusal to abandon the people who mattered. 6 months later, they stood together on the observation deck of New Haven Station, watching as the first wave of refugee ships arrived from the scattered communities. The station was growing daily, becoming a symbol of hope in the darkness. A place where the survivors could rebuild, could dream of a future beyond mere survival. "Regrets?" Nyla asked, her hand finding his. Jace considered the question. He'd lost his ship, his old life, his comfortable isolation. In return, he'd gained a purpose, a family, and a love that defied every law of probability and common sense. "Just one," he said. "What's that?" "That it took me so long to find you." She smiled, and in that smile he saw the future. Uncertain but bright, dangerous but worth fighting for. Around them, the station hummed with life and laughter, with the sound of children playing and families reuniting. It wasn't the ending anyone would have predicted. A broken smuggler and an exiled princess, building a new world from the ashes of the old. But sometimes the best stories were the ones nobody saw coming. Sometimes love really was enough. And sometimes when everything seemed lost, ordinary people found the strength to do extraordinary things. The stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns, but for the first time in years, the future looked bright. Together they watched the ships come home. If you've made it this far, you've just experienced something special. A story about love conquering fear, about choosing hope over despair, about the incredible things that happen when ordinary people refuse to give up on each other. Stories like this one remind us that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our weapons. It's our capacity for love, for sacrifice, for standing up for what's right, even when the odds are impossible. If this story moved you, if it made you believe in the power of love and hope, then hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that heroes come in all shapes and sizes, that love is worth fighting for, and that sometimes the most broken people are the ones capable of the greatest courage. Let me know in the comments what you thought. Did Jace and Nyla's story touch your heart? What would you have done in their situation? And what other stories of hope and heroism would you like to hear? Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to find our way home. And sometimes the best journeys are the ones we take together. Until next time, keep believing in the impossible. Keep fighting for what matters, and never ever give up on love. This has been another story from our collection. Thank you for listening, and remember, in a universe full of darkness, you have the power to be someone's light.